Search for the discovery of a Planet X. I heard the Japanese found something.
That's correct. Recently in 2008, a lead astronomer by the name of Takashi Mukai, Dr. Mukai at the Kobe University in Japan, plotted the diameter of a planet between 4 to 8 times the size of Earth on a highly elliptical orbit, which is very similar to the ancient Sumerian descriptions of a Nibiru, a 4 to 8 times the size of Earth planet, a body within our own solar system. So it's a very interesting academic awareness to all of a sudden put on the radar the idea of a Planet X, once again confirming the ancient knowledge.
So, how long have we been looking for a Planet X?
The current model for a search for a 10th planet within our solar system goes all the way back to the time of Percival Lowell. But on the modern radar, it really started in the late 80s with the Dr. Robert Harrington, who was the lead astronomer of the Naval Observatory in Washington, and he plotted a planet that would be in the southern ecliptic plane and be on a highly elliptic orbit, and very much closely matched Zacharias Sitchin's model of looking at the Sumerian texts which discuss Nibiru, which translates into planet of the crossing. Nibiru was also a planet on a highly elliptical orbit. Zacharias Sitchin met with Dr. Harrington at NASA, and they discussed the orbital calculations of how Nibiru's orbit, described by the Sumerians, very closely matched Dr. Harrington's planetary model for a 10th planet. So ever since the late 80s, astronomical advances in imaging in space and using infrared technology in space to penetrate the deep cold barriers of space,
yes,
they've started to image planets and find things that we now call brown dwarfs or extrasolar planets, planets around other suns. So it's becoming very possible that we're starting to grasp the idea that there could be a yet undetected another member of our solar system that we would call the 10th planet. Now, all these other little ones like Sedna, Quoar, those don't count. What we're looking for is something extremely large, 4 to 8 times the size of Earth.
Very interesting. So what is so important about a Planet X?
Well, the interesting points about Planet X are, we have all these stories in the Bible of how there was a great flood, or we hear these things of, Wormwood or Armageddon in biblical references, and people immediately jump to the story of Nibiru, this ancient Sumerian text, which describes how a planet within our solar system, which came gravitationally attached to these inner planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, it eventually crossed paths with our primitive Earth and caused what we now today have as the asteroid belt and this big gap between Mars and Jupiter. Between Mars and Jupiter, where the asteroid belt is, this large gap is just enough room for a planet to have once existed. So all type of theories abound are, where did it go? Is this planet, was it ever possible? So the idea of a Planet X means a 10th member, something beyond Pluto, which would, represent 10, but X also means unknown, yet we still haven't discovered or have scientifically confirmed that this planet exists. However, if it does, and it's 4 to 8 times the size of Earth, we're talking about confirming ancient biblical information from a culture that's 6,000 years old and describes beings which come from this planet. We call it heaven, they've called it Nibiru, but if beings actually exist on this planet, the Anunnaki, we have ancestors on another planet.
So Jason, could Planet X have killed the dinosaurs, and what is the Nemesis theory?
Well, interestingly enough, Hubble, one of the latest telescopes that we use to image, things in space, has pointed out that most solar systems, external solar systems, not our own, that we image in space, have found out to be binary. They contain 2 suns. So it seems to standard that maybe our solar system is in fact a binary solar system. We have 2 suns. So this theory goes on to the terms of someone by the name of Dr. Richard Mueller, who postulated a thesis, said Nemesis, that there's this other planet that orbits our second sun. So we have a binary solar system in theory, and our second sun would be a failed sun, a brown dwarf, meaning our sun now is active, and we have another second sun that's not active anymore. It's a brown dwarf. And this planet, Dr. Mueller from Berkeley theorizes, has an additional planet which orbits it. He calls it Nemesis. And he theorized that this planet's orbit around our failed sun would periodically dislodge comets from the Oort cloud, which is a very far out debris of kind of like the asteroid belt, but much further out, billions of miles. And this occasional orbit would send debris to the inner part of the solar system, comets, asteroids, and these are the things, fragments and relevant pieces, are thought to have been what maybe have caused the dinosaur extinction. These dislodged Oort cloud debris being sent into the inner solar system by Nemesis.
So, how do astronomers go about looking for Planet X, and who are these people?
One of the latest telescopes that they've deployed is called Space Infrared Telescope Facility, SIRTIF. It's actually just renamed to Spitzer after a famous astronomer. So Spitzer is one of the latest telescopes that they keep below freezing temperatures, super cooled in space. And what it's able to do is penetrate these deep layers of dust and debris, where once before they couldn't see through it, but using infrared, they can match the temperature of these dust clouds and create like an invisible veil to go right through them and see much more vast details of space, planets, extrasolar planets. So what the latest devices are basically using infrared telescopes and astronomical observatories, which they're going to keep below freezing out in space to do these deep space observations.
Wow, yeah. Was a lot of ancient knowledge recorded about a Planet X?
The very first culture that we have record of on Earth is the Sumerian culture. It's been known as Mesopotamia, Babylon, but initially 6,000 years ago, 3800 BC to be exact, Sumer arose. They had over 100 of the first for a civilization to take place. They invented things like mathematics, science, kingship, courts, laws, judges, education, writing. So one of the more esoteric aspects of the Sumerian legacy of information from 6,000 years ago is their astronomical data. They included all the knowledge of the planets in our solar system, the distance between the planets, what these planets look like in space. Their model contained an additional planet, which they called Nibiru. Zecharia Sitchin wrote a book called The 12th Planet in 1976, which chronicles the idea that the Sumerians were aware of the 9 planets we know of, plus the Sun, our Moon, and this additional planet, Nibiru, making the 12th planet. So some of the very interesting information about Planet X that's ancient knowledge comes to us in the form of religious texts. For instance, the idea of the Great Flood. There's an actual Sumerian stone tablet. It's a form of cuneiform script, written language from 6,000 years ago, and it's done in a stone. They did it in clay and then would fire it up in a stove, making it into stone. So there are these stone tablets, for instance, from Sumer that describe when Nibiru became part of our inner solar system and the gravitational effects it caused when it passed by Earth caused one of the great ice sheets in Antarctica to crack off and instantly rose the water levels of the Earth by 300 feet. This is the idea of a great flood. Many of the stories in biblical form, which we have in Genesis or in today's modern biblical tales, there's a Sumerian derivative that's in stone, unchanged from thousands of years ago. So the ancient knowledge about a Planet X really starts to raise the eyebrows of attention when we can put 2 and 2 together and see that there's a correlation between these ancient stories of a great flood or the giants upon the earth. Who are these great beings that were here? Were they physical giants? Well, the Sumerians describe beings they lived amongst that came from Nibiru. They called them the Anunnaki, and Anunnaki simply means those who from heaven come to earth.
How can these ancient Sumerians know so much, and who taught them?
The Sumerians say that everything they know they were taught by the Anunnaki. The term Anunnaki means those who from heaven come to earth. And the Sumerians left us thousands of these stone tablets which recorded their daily events of just basic everyday transactions between, here's some wheat and barley for a donkey, or education, systems of courts, laws, and judges. But they also recorded their daily events and interactions with these beings, which they called the Anunnaki. Now, in the Bible, we hear about the giants upon the earth. We lived amongst the giants upon the earth. There was a time when there were giants upon the earth. So these Sumerians speak of the Anunnaki in the same instance, but 2,000 years removed from the time of Christianity, as living amongst their living gods.
So Jason, will Planet X be returning in 2012, and will it cause any global effects as it has in the past?
The only culture to use 2012 as a reference to a timeline of catastrophe, Armageddon, are the Mayans. But what they did is they had a prediction in a Baktun of one of their long count calendars. Now they had several Baktuns, predictions on this long count calendar, which was separate from the traditional calendar system they used to measure time. These were more of a predictions made over, just thousands of years, and these weren't always accurate. No one can tell the future, not including the Mayans. One of these predictions in the past on their Baktuns stated that their god Kukulkan was going to return. The same date of a predicted arrival of Kukulkan, the conquistadors showed up and aggressively converted all the Mayans to Christianity